I'm actually quite honored to welcome you to this induction ceremony of the Scientific Committee of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria. Basically, we have gathered today to mark this significant milestone in our collective journey towards mainstreaming sustainability in Africa. I think, like most of us know, we typically say that sustainability is a journey. It's like when you compare it to when you say success, it's a journey, not a destination. And understanding the challenges and the opportunities involved in sustainability journey, it is important to look at it from that lens of saying that it is a collective journey, actually. Our team for this particular induction ceremony is, which I believe that Professor Amechi is going to do a lot of very solid justice to, is mainstreaming sustainability in Africa through professionalism, standardization, and of course, enhanced capabilities. It sort of underscores the urgent need for our expertise, collaboration, and innovation in driving sustainable development in the continent. So again, the importance of innovation cannot be emphasized. It's certainly important for us to be able to drive what we want, for us to be able to achieve our goals, the expertise that is required, and the collaboration that is also needed, like I emphasized earlier. So basically, as we induct our esteemed scientific committee members, we also recognize that, their exceptional expertise, their dedication, and the passion for sustainability. So we sort of look forward to their valuable contributions today in shaping the Institute's research agenda, the policy frameworks, and also the capacity building initiatives that are associated with this. Basically, our keynote speaker will set the tone for our discussions, and our plenary session, we feature these inductees where we believe that, and having that strong trust in them, sharing their insights on the role of professionalism, standardization, and of course, enhanced capabilities in advancing sustainability in Africa. So please, let us seize the opportunity to be able to connect, learn from each other, because again, you have to look at the collective nature and the multi-stakeholder dimension and approach to driving sustainability. So let's move forward that agenda. Thank you for joining us. And I wish you all a productive and enriching experience. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ismail Omamagbe, for your very insightful remarks. And of course, we thank First Bank for the sponsorship of this event of today. And for officially opening this training. Your words indeed have set the tone for what promises to be an engaging and impactful session. With that, we now move forward to the next phase of the program. Again, I would like to repeat myself. With great honor, we introduce our esteemed keynote speaker for today's webinar. Our topic is mainstreaming sustainability in Africa, professionalism, standardization, and capabilities. Our keynote speaker is a thought leader in sustainability and a distinguished expert in the field. Please join me in welcoming Professor Kenneth Amechi, who is the president of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria, and also professor of sustainable finance and chair in transnational governance at the European University Institute. Their participants, please make welcome Professor Kenneth Amechi. Prof, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Maurice, and thank you, everyone. Good morning, or good afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. I want to thank my colleagues in the academia, thought leaders who have graciously accepted to serve um, on our scientific committee. We don't take it for granted. It's your time, your effort, your knowledge we want to tap into. So what I want to present today is not something you're not aware of, but it's also a way to encourage us to see how we can sharpen our take on sustainability in Africa. And from there, think of how we can be part of the change we want to see on the continent. So I'm using more like the three C's, so I'll set the context, and I want to focus more on what I may call the tensions or conflicts, and then see if I can charge my colleagues to see what they can do about sustainability and how their role and how they can help us bring their scientific capabilities to help us drive the agenda in Nigeria as well as in Africa. So what is the context here? So if you think about Africa in terms of potentials, Africa has young population. Africa has numbers in terms of people. You can think about consumers if you want to see us from that perspective. But Africa also has significant natural resources and rich cultures as well. So Africa is diverse. Africa is not, homogeneous in any sense. But then the question is, we have challenges as part of that context. So Africa has very high unemployment, especially youth unemployment. The World Bank data says that we about 60% of our young people are unemployed. Nigeria churns out about 3.5 million graduates every year going into the labor force. And also the National Bureau of Statistics says that about 70% of Nigerians are employed in the informal sector. So unemployment is a big problem in Nigeria. Unemployment is a big problem in Africa. You think about poor infrastructure. Africa has poor infrastructure, and it's an area that requires urgent attention to. Depending on how you look at it, you can say Africa has weak economies. If you want to benchmark Africa with other continents, especially the developed economies, and by implication, you can also say we have weak institutions. And I use this very carefully because the idea of weak institutions might suggest that we don't have institutions, or when people talk about institutional void. So the weakness here is in relation to the sort of economies or societies we are trying to mimic. But I would say we have institutions, but not ones that are supporting the economies and societies we want to look like. So that then leaves me with a question, okay? If you have this rich Africa, bright Africa, with the challenges I've mentioned, for us as a scientific committee or as a community, there's also a question here in terms of what type of businesses, investors, and entrepreneurs does Africa need, given the context? So if you have the potentials, you have the challenges. So it helps us to question and challenge ourselves to say, well, what sort of entrepreneurs then do we need? What sort of investors do we need? I've done a lot of work looking at varieties of capitalism. So we need to come back to our own context instead of just taking things thrown at us, because there is every tendency to look at towards the West or the global North for some of the things we do. And then the other question is also, how can businesses and investors contribute to addressing some of the problems I've highlighted? So, and that in itself it means that as academics or as thought leaders, as a community, we need to think of how we can use our profession, our knowledge to address some of the challenges within the continent. But there are also conflicts. And from a sustainability perspective, we as sustainability professionals are trying to be part of the change we want to see. But at the same time, we know that there are conflicts. Sustainability is not a smooth journey as much as we want to say, well, it is a journey. But it's a journey filled with a lot of conflicts, professional conflicts even. because some of us may be aware of what is happening with, say, sustainability accounting and reporting, where different professional interests are beginning to manifest. But in a good way, we can also look at these conflicts, not necessarily that conflicts are bad, but conflicts can provide spaces for rethinking what we do. So what are some of the tensions I see? One is the tension between environmental and social sustainability. When people talk about sustainability these days, especially in the global north, all they hear is climate and environment. And I've taken it upon myself, although I appear as a one-man band, trying to push the idea that sustainability is broader than environmental challenges or climate issues. We shouldn't also ignore the social dimension. And in Africa, we also need to prioritize some of those things that are important to us. And one good thing about the SDGs is that everything is connected. So the global north has chosen to put climate at the center of their conversation. Nothing says we can't maybe use things that are peculiar to us. It could be poverty, it could be gender issues, it could be health, and put those things at the heart of our sustainability conversation. But without also ignoring that these tensions exist. The other tension I see is the tension between profit and purpose, and it has continued to be there. As much as we want to, showcase that sustainability is a good thing, there is always that tension between the short-term pressures and the long-term interest around purpose. And when push comes to shove, we know what happens in many organizations. Profit interest will always trump the purpose interest. There is also the tension between top management and middle management. Middle managers tend to probably drive the sustainability agenda. So if you're a sustainability manager or a sustainability professional, or you're likely to be part of the middle management team. But if your top management does not buy into it as much as you want, then you're up against a challenge. And we have also seen that sustainability works well where you have good top management or good top management buy-in that drives and shows leadership. In the Nigerian context, I think there's also the tension between region, different parts. So many people, most of the corporates are concentrated in Lagos, and you see them doing a lot in Lagos, but it's the Lagos and the rest of Nigeria. So we also need to find a way to diversify the things we do in terms of our sustainability activities across the different parts of Nigeria. There's also the tension between the global and the local. Do we buy local or do we buy global? Or do we adopt local practices or do we follow global practices? How do we reconcile them, especially when they're in conflict? So that tension is always there too. There is also the tension between short-term and long-term, in time-wise, temporality. Someone argued that a famous British economist said, in the long term, we are all dead. And how then do you measure long term and short term? How long is a piece of string? For Nigeria, for example, long term can mean 90 days. It can also mean 3 months. Whereas in some contexts, long term can mean 100 years. I make this joke that the Chinese, when Britain said they will keep Hong Kong for 100 years, the Chinese were liberal about it, okay, no problem. But the 100 years came and then Britain didn't want to. So, if you have long-term orientation, it also probably differ from culture to culture, but it's still a problem. There's also the tension between regulation and voluntary compliance, where some people might say, well, we don't need regulation. Regulation will stifle us or regulation will be a burden. Whereas others say, we need regulation to create a level playing ground. And we can also see it playing out in Nigeria. I think, say, for example, the Nigerian Sustainable Banking Principles, people say, well, it needs to be harder, it needs to be tougher. We also have the Financial Reporting Council now making it mandatory for companies to report. So there's always that tension between regulation and voluntary compliance. And some people might think that regulation in itself, whilst it's a good thing, can also be a problem in the sense that it says a minimum bar, which then might trigger a race to the bottom, where companies who may want to do more may not want to because they feel that sticking to regulation might be an option. There's also the tension between risk an opportunity, depending on how companies want to focus on these issues. And if you think of sustainability as a risk to be managed, when people talk about materiality assessment and stuff like that, then it becomes a risk function. And then we see that tension, especially when also people think of sustainability as a space for opportunities, as a space for innovation. Depending on the dominant culture within organizations, they can also stifle, or not stifling, but impact on how we think about sustainability generally. There is also the tension between negative impact and positive impact. So if you see sustainability as impact management, where do you place the emphasis? Some companies try to talk more about their positive impact and play down on their negative impact, whereas others focus on their negative impact and don't do much about their positive impact. But there is need for balance. So companies, for obvious reasons, because it's also linked to their reputation, they would rather not talk about their negative impact, and that may also lead to issues around greenwashing and the other accusations companies are often made. There is also the tension between what I might call the partial and the holistic approach to sustainability. There is a bit of cherry picking if sometimes we ask ourselves, oh, there are 17 goals. We can choose those that we want to work with. And for obvious reasons, you can do that because maybe it's efficient, it's effective. But there is also a bigger question here in terms of, are we thinking of sustainability from a broader perspective? Is it a culture, or is it something we just have as an add-on? The other tension I see is the tension between what I call individualism and collectivism. Do I do it alone? Most companies, especially some of our colleagues who are coming from a marketing, communication, brand perspective, it's always about our brand. We want to protect our brands and we want to be seen as the one doing it. So we tend to often go it alone, but there's also a space for collaboration. So, and sometimes collaboration can become problematic. So it's also a possible tension and something to reflect on. Some of the societal problems I've highlighted are big problems that can be solved by a single organization. So finding a way to collaborate can also help. But the other point, which is my final tension here before I pose the question I have here, is the tension between thinking and doing. When we talk about sustainability, we like the idea. Businesses, leaders, it's something we often like, but when it comes to doing, it becomes quite difficult. And there are different things that may lead us not to do this thing. So it could be that we have pressures, profit pressures, short-termism, can even be pressure from competition or regulation that might affect our ability to translate what we think is a good thing into practice. So for us as academics and thought leaders, maybe a question to ask ourselves is, what roles do leaders and professionals play in fostering sustainability? It will be a very important one as we go through this sustainability journey and as we count on your expertise in helping us make sense of what society is doing and what the professionals are able to do. So what roles do leaders, especially here sustainability professionals, play in fostering sustainability? Then I move to the last point, which is my counsel. I mean, I'm not in a good position to do that because I'm also guilty of the same charge. But as academics, I think we can talk openly and freely about some of these issues. And it's about the idea of decolonizing our interest in sustainability. And that's where we count on you as thought leaders here to help us. Because in my academic career, especially in the UK and in Europe generally, I see a problem where we try to be like the people we work with, the community of practice, put it that way. So what I may call the insider syndrome, trying very hard to be an insider. Say, for example, if I'm looking at sustainability in Nigeria, I want to position it in such a way that it looks very much like a Western scholarship. But it may not make a lot of sense to us because where some of these Western countries are, it's not where many African countries are. So there is need for us to decolonize our research in a way that also speaks to our issue. There's also what I may call the outsider syndrome. The outsider syndrome here is using the outsider's lens to understand our reality. It is very, very strange. I mean, well, you can say knowledge is universal, but when somebody looks at Foucault, governmentality, and sustainability in Nigeria, it's bizarre. I mean, it's strange. As much as Foucault and governmentality makes a lot of sense, or Bourdieu, some of these kind of scholars' theories we find outside there, as long as they can say, well, they have universal meaning, and one can apply them. But we also need to be careful and also look inward and see if there are perspectives from African countries or the region that can help us make better sense of what we're doing. So in that case, we are not forcing ourselves we are not pushing ourselves too hard to depend on what is produced outside. And then there is the other point there, which is about what I call the imposter syndrome, which is about abandoning the familiar to embrace the unfamiliar. And what do I mean here? Sometimes we think that our research space is inferior. So, for example, I'm doing some work now on community-owned businesses in Nigeria. And then there is a tendency to say, well, if I present that to an academic global community, they may not understand it. They may not even value it as much as they may value a piece of work from Ireland, for example. Ireland has a population of 5.2 million naira. Sorry, 5.2 million people. But in Imo State, Nigeria, is 5.2 million people as well. So the population of Imo, the population I'm using for my study is as good as the population in Ireland. But then one feels inferior to present one's idea because it's not coming from familiar places. So that's what I call the imposter syndrome. So you feel that your research agenda is not good enough to be presented at the international or global level. So as academics, as scientific committee members, we want you to help us in this case. That's the question I'm posing here. What sort of scholarship is required to mainstream appropriate sustainability practices in Africa? How can you help us avoid the challenges of the insider syndrome, the outsider syndrome, as well as the imposter syndrome? And that's where we will count on you to help us achieve this. So I'll pause here now in the interest of time, and then we'll come back. I'll meet you again when we have the panel session. But thank you for joining, and thank you for accepting to do this important work for us.
Thank you so much, Prof. As usual, thank you for your very thought-provoking keynote address. Your perspectives bring us to a lot of reflection, especially on the topic, mainstreaming sustainability in Africa, as we looked at professionalism, standardization, and capabilities. It's also provided us with valuable knowledge, a call to action, of course, and a deeper understanding of the critical role that sustainability plays in shaping Africa's future. Oh, yes, now we're going to the meat of the day. It's time for the oath administration. Again, you will recall that we're having an induction ceremony of the scientific committee, pardon me, of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria. Please join me in welcoming no other person than Madam Ini Abimbola, the Vice President of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria, Spain. Of course, some of you will agree with me that she's widely recognized as Madam Fixer. She knows how to get things done. She's also the director of TESO Practice Consulting Limited, a distinguished firm specialized in sustainability, corporate social responsibility, and management consulting. Madam Ini Abimbola, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Maurice. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to our inductees. It is indeed a very delightful occasion for us to welcome you all to this induction. And so today, as we know, marks a very significant milestone in our journey as sustainability professionals. And you accepting to join the scientific committee of the sustainability professionals You are stepping into a distinguished group of experts that are committed to shaping the future of sustainability in Africa. Your role comes with a responsibility to advance professionalism, to drive standardization, and to help us strengthen capacity building across industries. Through research, advisory, and thought leadership, you will influence policies, organizations, and communities, ensuring that sustainability is not just a concept, but also a way of life. So as a commitment to uphold the highest ethical standard and values of Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria, I invite you all to take the spin oath, as we call it. Please unmute your mics and I will speak and then you will repeat after me. This is to all our inductees. So please mention your name.
I, Victoria Olute Honorable,
A scientific committee member.
scientific committee member
On this 27th day of March 2025.
on this 27th day of March 2025.
Hereby agree to be governed by.
Hereby agree to be governed by.
And to comply with the Code of Ethics of Spain.
And to comply with the Code of Ethics of Spain.
I understand that I have the responsibility to be a member.
I understand I have the responsibility to be a member.
In a good standing in order to retain my membership.
In a good standing in order to retain my membership.
I understand that this membership of this committee, I understand that membership of this committee.
I understand that membership of this committee
will be revoked.
Will be revoked.
Where there is a contrary event or issue that stands out against my membership.
Where there is contrary issue or event that stands out.
I hereby accept the obligation to observe the regulations of the Institute.
I hereby accept the obligation to observe regulations
of the Institute as set up for this committee.
Regulation of the Institute as set by the committee.
As a scientific committee member.
As a scientific committee member.
I will uphold and promote the reputation of the Institute.
I will uphold and promote
the reputation of Spain and the Spain Institute.
And the sustainability profession.
And the
sustainability profession.
I will maintain and develop my professional sustainability competence.
I will maintain and
enhance my professional sustainability competence.
Influence and persuade others of the business case for a responsible and sustainable approach to doing. That's a long one, so I'll take it slowly. I will influence and persuade others of the business case.
I will influence and persuade others of the business case
for a responsible and sustainable approach to doing business.
For a responsible and sustainable approach to doing business.
And supporting that approach across disciplines.
And supporting that approach across discipline.
I will contribute to the development of the sustainability profession.
I will contribute to the development of the sustainability institution
and its effectiveness through my work in this committee.
and effectiveness through my work in this company.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and thank you all. You are now officially inducted into the Sustainability Professionals Institute Scientific Committee. We look forward to your leadership. We look forward to your commitment in shaping a sustainable future for Africa. Thank you so much for accepting to do this with us, and congratulations once again.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Inia Bimbala, for administering the oath and for your leadership in advancing sustainability practices, as you always do. Again, we acknowledge you and we thank you. We recognize that your role in shaping the next generation of sustainability professionals is truly commendable. If I may just interject, please, you've said your oaths, kindly go back on mute. Their background.
Maurice, we're not hearing you. I think you're on mute as well.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you. I think that I unmuted. I hope that someone did not mute me. Please, let's bear it in mind. Madam Ini, we really appreciate your administration of the oath on behalf of the Institute, and of course for your leadership in advancing sustainability practices. Your role in shaping the next generation of sustainability professionals is not unnoticed and is not unrecognized, and indeed truly commendable. With that, we now move on to the next segment of the program, which is the panel session. As you all agree with me, it's a crucial part of today's event. Today, we'll be hearing industry experts as they share insights, as they explore key strategies, challenges, and opportunities in embedding sustainability principles across various sectors. I am very pleased to introduce the lead discussant, no other person but the president of the Sustainability Professional Institute of Nigeria itself, SPIN, a distinguished panelist, a distinguished leader who's been with us for more than 4 years now, and the following distinguished panelists that will also be sharing insights with him, bringing their wealth of knowledge and experience to the conversation of today. In no particular order, I introduce Professor Emmanuel Adegbite. He's a leading governance scholar, ranked among the world's top researchers in governance and accounting by Scholar GPS 2024. He has received multiple awards, including Best Paper at the 2024 Academy of Management meeting and the 2020 Africa Academy of Management Conference. His research is published in top journals and he serves as an editor for several academic publications. A visiting professor at James Cook University, he advises business leaders and policymakers. He has contributed to Ghana's 2022 Corporate Governance Code and Africa's 2024 Director Development Program Framework for the African Corporate Governance Network. Prof, you're welcome. And I guess I'll be saying Prof, you're welcome a couple of times today. Next, I will introduce Professor Judy Missouri, who is a business and society scholar with a great interest in theorizing, understanding, and influencing how organizations tackle sustainability challenges in different contexts, geographies, and industries. Professor Judy Missouri identifies as a social justice advocate who believes in working with diverse actors to co-produce research and that has positive and sustained societal impacts. You're very welcome, Prof. Next is Professor Chukwumerije Okereke. who is a globally recognized leading scholar on climate governance and international development with expertise in climate justice, national green growth transition in Africa, climate adaptation, business climate strategies, environmental policy, advising governments, corporates, and international institutions such as the UN and African Union. You're very welcome, Prof. Next is Professor Owafiokun Idemudia. Professor Idemudia became the Dean of the College of Social and Applied Human Sciences in January 2023. He holds a BSc from the University of Ilorin, an MA from the University of Westminster, and a PhD from Lancaster University. Previously, he chaired the Department of Social Science at York University. His interdisciplinary research on natural resource extraction, sustainable development, and Black geographies have shaped Africa's policies. As Dean, he oversees over 200 faculty, 5,000 undergraduates, and 350 graduate students. He is dedicated to enhancing student experience, advancing equity, diversity, inclusion, and ingenuity, as well as fostering excellence in research and teaching. You're very welcome, Prof. I now introduce Dr. Adaize Okoye, who is a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria and has held academic positions at Canterbury Christ Church University, University of Wales, and University of Hull. She has published extensively in top journals and authored a monograph on corporate social responsibility in legal frameworks. She has been a fellow at Inner Temple and an Institute of Advanced Legal Studies and serves on several academic advisory and editorial boards. Formerly an EDI lead between 2021 and 2024, she is a senior fellow of Advanced HE and continues contributing to legal scholarship and governance initiatives. Dr. Okoye, you're very welcome. I then introduce Dr. Natalie Benish. I must apologize if I didn't pronounce that name well. Natalie is the Executive Director of Circular Economy Innovation Partnership in Lagos, driving research, advocacy, and programs to promote circular economy, business, and investment in Nigeria. Previously, she led Aegon Asset Management's Responsible Investment Engagement program in Netherlands and managed the academic network at the UN Principle for Responsible Investment in London. She began her career at Deal Corporate Education, designing leadership programs for major firms. She has lectured at the University of Singapore and the University of Amsterdam. Natalie holds a PhD and MSc from the London School of Economics and a BA from McGill University. Dr. Natalie, you're very welcome, ma'am. I now introduce Professor Tazib Rajwani, who is an expert in international business and strategy, formerly leading Surrey Business School's department and senior management team. He has held academic positions at Essex, Cranfield, and several top universities worldwide. Before academia, he worked at KPMG Corporate Finance, managing global projects and driving thought leadership. His award-winning research on non-market strategy and corporate political activities is widely published and cited in major media. He advises firms, teaches future leaders, and serves on editorial boards. A World Economic Forum expert, he has consulted for top global organizations and spoken at prestigious conferences. He holds a PhD from Imperial College London. Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. What an assembly. Prof, you are the lead for this panel. I now hand over the session to you. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you've handed me over to the lions and lionesses, right? Okay, great. Good friends. I mean, it's good to have all of you here. And for us, it's just a conversation, nothing um, provocative, but just to see how we can get the conversation going. So let me, in no order, invite Adeze Okoye to, probably share some thoughts in terms of her take on sustainability in Africa based on what her background too as a lawyer. Because we try to be as interdisciplinary as possible, and sustainability is that space that invites everyone to contribute. So, Adese, do you want to share with us some thoughts about what you are currently thinking of sustainability in Africa? I know it's a big question, but
Yes, good morning, and it's great to join this really esteemed company. It's great to be invited, and you gave us a very thought-provoking keynote. In fact, I've been thinking about some of the questions you raised, and I think that will be a starting off point. For a lot of my writing, I had pushed the question of whether we contextualize the practice of corporate sustainability. And that it was what I was going to talk about in relationship to the challenge we face uniquely within the African context. There's a lot of goals within the Sustainable Development Goals that are very pertinent to what we have. And there are many reasons why we may choose to order our focus within those goals very differently to other contexts. In some of my writing, I pushed that perhaps within our context, the relationship with governance, governments and businesses is quite different. And the relationship between regulation and the formal and informal sector is also quite different. And these are things which I think we have to think about. Within the decolonial space, it's difficult to capture exactly memories of what systems were pre-colonial, but attempts could be made across various regions within different parts, for instance, of Nigeria, to understand traditional ways of doing business and whether we have any relevance application between those ways of doing business and what we feel should be sustainable. Regulation can play either a facilitative role or even a detrimental role, but it must be engaged with. And so we found that although we have so much changes and sometimes inaction, there is continued debate about how we get that relationship going. So I think for me, this presents a great opportunity to enhance the profession, to have great discussions about what we want for the context we are dealing with, and to also begin to reflect deeply on the different perspectives we could put together and help shape even regulation in this sector. I do think that there is a role for business and that business can play a role beyond what it is currently doing. I think there is a role for the stakeholders, the various stakeholders, to engage with business, to dialogue, both in a positive way, but also in a way of regulatory penalties for non-compliance, which I guess is not as popular as people would say, but from a legal perspective, there's room for that as well. And I think at this point, I'll just stop and allow others speak. Thank you very much.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you, Adese. And Chooks has a class, so I want to quickly draw him in. Chooks, if you have like 2 minutes, just bear with us. I know we are all busy in different ways. And what I want you to talk about, maybe it requires a full lecture, but if you can give us 2 minutes of your time to say something about the environmental side. I know you and I go back and forth. I mean, you're on the environmental side of things, I'm on the other side. What do you think about what we should do about the environmental side of things now, in terms of where you see things going?
Thanks very much for making this provision so that I can share a few thoughts before I run for my lecture. But also your keynote speech really captures the opportunities, but also the tension in mainstreaming sustainability into the main economic framework, not just in Africa, but globally. The specific situation with Africa, especially with the environmental dimension, relies on the tension between perception of economic benefits of embracing sustainability, environmental dimension of sustainability, with economic growth. This is the central challenge that African countries face. This is not, of course, unique to African countries, because all over the world, whether in the UK, in the US, the question of how can you keep the lights on, how can you keep economic growing while also addressing environmental dimension of sustainability is a central one. The challenge is exacerbated in Africa because of the prevailing condition of poverty and underdevelopment. And the question, therefore, is not just a question about balancing environmental and economic dimension, as well as, of course, social dimensions, because of the yearning inequality in Africa. It's also a question of justice. Why should I embrace this tension and work hard to balance environmental and social and economic dimensions of sustainability when I have not been the one that contributed to this problem the most? And this question takes very, very sharp dimension and turn in the context of climate change, where we know that 75% of the world have contributed just about 20 or so percent of the global emission historically, but they are the ones that are suffering from the most impact of climate change. But this question is also applicable in all other environmental issues: water, the use of cement, the use of precious metal, lead, aluminum, wood, etc. 76% of the precious minerals and metals used in the world historically have been used mostly by the 20 or so 25% of the global population. But if you go slightly beyond this question of justice, but also how to reconcile environment and economic dimension, my research, which will soon be published in the London Consensus, shows that there are at least four key areas that present particular challenge for mainstreaming sustainability in Africa. Number one is political commitment and leadership. But this question is, of course, related to this tension that I already told you. But the second area is policy integration. My research has shown that it is very, very difficult, and that despite all the SDG goals that Adeze was speaking, the idea of policy integration remains a challenge. The third area is capacity. There is a whopping lack of capacity to work on policy integration, but also to come up with detailed policies to help countries tackle, and even corporates tackle, this issue. And I would like to announce that one of the things I would like Spain to do going forward on this area is to really facilitate more corporate uptake of environmental principles through some kind of ranking, rating, and disclosure. And I'm happy to talk about that when we have time. So I will leave it at those areas. Many more people are qualified to talk about public awareness, finance, stakeholder, technology, and MRV. But I don't have time to delve into all of those. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chooks. And then maybe whenever is for us to tackle this question of, should sustainability be simply seen as climate, right? Because that's one of the pressures in Nigeria at the moment, where companies are being sucked into this narrative of climate finance. And that simply means sustainability for them. Maybe something, if you have a split second, you can say, yes, we should see that such, or no, think about it in other ways.
Oh, no, it has never, and it should never. So climate change is one of the many SDG goals. It's central in a sense, because without a conducive climate, you cannot pursue the other SDG goals. And it links to water, it links to poverty, it links to education, but no, all of them, we need to have an integrated and holistic approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chooks. You can go back to your lecture and send our regards to your students.
Thank you. I'll let them hear. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks. And maybe the Secretariat, please note this idea in terms of ranking, and that Chooks mentioned, maybe something we can take on board with our scientific committee to see how we can actualize some of those ideas.
Absolutely, Prof. We
Yeah.
got you.
So let me go to Judy. Judy, yeah, in fact, I mean, it's too early for you where you are, I guess. Hope you're fully awake, Judy. Yeah.
I'm partially awake.
Judy, you've done a lot of work looking at sustainability in Africa, and you contribute to us because you're Kenyan and you also bring in that dimension. And we try to reach out to other parts of Africa. So what we are doing in Nigeria is to set the tone, but also working with other people. So based on your experience working on sustainability issues in Africa and beyond, what advice would you give to us as sustainability professionals? What would you want us to think about, and also how do we prioritize some of the things we do?
First of all, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for inviting me to join this esteemed group and community. I think I want to pick on from where our last speaker, because he focused a lot on the climate side, and I want to focus more on the social. And as you really set a good scene, you told us of the context, and unfortunately or fortunately, Africa deals with a lot of social issues, which some organizations, especially, FDI, will consider, or at least we will pitch, our labor practices or our context as an advantage for multinationals or for foreign direct investors or transnational corporations coming to Africa. You will promote, in terms of our minimum wage is lower than in the global north, and all these things might be a business advantage. But from where we sit from a sustainability, we will be clamoring, for fair labor practices, human rights. So the tensions you spoke about, this social versus economic or climate versus social. And so we find most of the time the social suffer. And we see that in the context of post-Trump, where now, the gains that we have been making will be threatened, by the kind of things that are happening in the global north. And so the question for us is, we are living in a global context. So EDI issues, that's diversity, equality, and that kind, all these policies will be under threat. Human rights, we know, are threatened as well. And the question is, what do we do, as professionals when the world is, turning left? Do we turn left with them? Or do we actually, craft our own path that addresses some of the concerns that we have? We know very well from a continent, the gains that we made from SDG are actually threatened. So we have negative trends that are, we've reversed, like I think 8 SDGs, if I remember right, in terms of the 2014 African report on the SDG. So things are not looking as positive as we would like to post-COVID. And so the question for us is, where do we go from here, and how do we craft a different path that speaks to our context, but that also addresses, our long-term sustainability, building strong and resilience within the African context. And I'll pick something on standardization. I know we will, we look up to the sustainability frameworks, in the global north, as Kenneth, you rightly, put in terms of the conflict. But my question has always been, what is the role of, bodies like the African Organization for Standardization, do we even know that it exists? And what can we do to strengthen its capacity? How can we engage differently with it? And how can we ensure that, we craft sustainability standards that are appropriate and that align with our African realities, which obviously should protect, our local economies from unfair global certification systems, for example, but also that will help strengthen intra-African trade, that encourages and promotes sustainability, that promotes community-led governance, because as Africans, we are, community is at the center of what we do, and we cannot ignore, relational perspectives. We cannot, ignore how we, and Adeze picked that, the question of our indigenous practices and what works for us. So I think, we have a role there to play, in terms of driving standardization of sustainability, not just for Nigeria, but for different contexts. In Africa, we are very diverse, but we have a lot of things that are in common. So coming together as a society to really craft, to think about what works for us and how do we move forward in terms of harmonizing the work that we are doing, but also recognizing and celebrating differences in West Africa, in Central, in East, in the South, addressing some of the dire issues that we see in different, contexts that actually, takes us back from a sustainability agenda and having a voice. So for example, what is happening in DRC Congo, what is our role as sustainability, professionals to speak to things that are uncomfortable for us, but we have to begin talking and we have to begin, building capacity and strengthening institutions in Africa. And also, of course, thinking about coordination, because there's a lot of fragmentation on the various things that are happening, in different Africa context, in different governments and the regions, and seeing where can we move forward and harmonize things, and speak in one voice. For example, e-waste regulation. Why should, countries, let's say in some countries that have opened their, environment towards e-waste, why should we allow that? While other countries are accepting it. So I'll
It's
stop.
also it's also the conflict between so people talk about waste to wealth, right? So people may say, okay, there is an opportunity there, but these are very important questions. And I like the point you made about the standardization, the African body that is in charge of that. This is my first time of hearing about it. I never knew. But sometimes, I mean, it would be nice to find out what what that institute stands for, or the body, and what we can do with them. But let me invite Tazib now to Tazib as a global scholar, and you study both strategy as well as geopolitics. So I'm just wondering, what do you think? What would you advise Nigerian companies or African firms at this point talking about sustainability in relation to what is coming from the US, right? So, and many organizations are stepping back or reducing their interests or focus on sustainability. If we are to advise African companies and professionals at this point, what would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kenneth, and great to be here with everyone. So look, globalization as we know it is unfortunately, I don't want to use the word dead, but it's really challenged. It's democracies are incredibly fragile now around the world. We just have to look at, of course, as we heard from Judy, we're seeing an autocratic democracy now in the US in some ways. There's a populist leader there, nationalistic, protectionist, tariffs have come in. And so, we're seeing a backlash in ESG. not only in the US, where, if you just look at the number of resolutions that were passed right now on environmental and sustainable issues, is dramatically fallen. If you take the last 300 resolutions across companies, only a couple went through. So I think there's a massive sustainability backlash in the US, and that's trickling into some of the European behaviors. From what I see, we're seeing companies externally not doing as much as they were doing last year, and kind of downplaying some of this. And in the background, they're still investing into some environmental capabilities to drive sustainability. But there is now a trade-off. They're thinking, how do we signal to the US what we're doing? And as we heard from Judy, there's a backlash also in kind of diversity inclusion issues, right, in terms of DEI. So I think the profession that is in Nigeria right now is in a very, very good opportunity to think about how they can design those integrated sustainable practices into organizations, communities, in the way you highlighted, Kenneth, which is that you're doing it in your way, not in the way of the US. So not copying best practice, but developing your own practices, setting a vision that makes sense for Nigeria, where leaders are responsible for setting clear and compelling sustainability kind of goals that are much more long-term focused, right? So this balance between economic growth, environmental stewardship, and social well-being. And so I think there's a big opportunity here to design interventions from your perspective to drive innovation, and that you're able to then develop those technologies and processes that are kind of going to help to create a much more balanced approach to kind of environmental and sustainability aspects. So I think right now, the group that's on this call, we know that more work needs to be done on sustainability, and we need to, of course, do it in a right way, in a balanced way. But without a doubt, I think what happens in the US will impact, unfortunately, Africa, in my opinion. And I'm a Kenyan guy. I was born in Kenya. Judy, of course, is from that region. But I just came back from South Africa recently, and I can already feel the US shaping South Africa in different ways. And the Trump administration will have a very different agenda, globally, right? So every country, unfortunately, will be pushed to act for themselves. And we can see this from India. We can see this from China. Europe is told, defense up, invest more into warfare and into defense. And so all of this means that we're moving into what Ian Bremmer calls the new world order, right? So it's like we had the G20, we had the G7, now it's the G0. Nobody's going to lead from the front. And I think sustainability has to be driven bottom up. And Nigeria is in a position right now to do it in their way. And as Kenneth said, do not try to imitate best practices, really do it bottom up. Capacity building is one of the best ways forward. But, I'm conscious of everyone's time, so I'm going to stop there.
What about that? Before you stop, right? I mean, also tapping into your idea of understanding of multinational firms and strategy, because some of our members also work for multinational firms, and some of these multinational firms could be American firms. They can push in some kind of sustainability idea, and at the global level, or from their headquarters, they also need to. So if we are to advise sustainability professionals in Nigeria, because they're caught in between, isn't it? They're caught in between what America wants and also what is applicable locally. So how do they square the circle?
Yeah. So that's a wonderful question. Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge right now is, if you're an American company doing business in Nigeria, typically the idea of environmental capabilities transferring across the US into Nigeria is kind of what you would look at, right? So there's compliance, corporate governance systems, and you're going to transfer your knowledge from home country to a host country like Nigeria. But I think we will see the opposite effect now, because in the US, the idea of ESG, there's so much anti-backlash, right? There's anti-ESG sentiment. the idea of talking about environment openly, you're kind of in many ways going to blacklist yourself. So you can already see the companies now really carefully not being entangled into politics. And so I think there's going to be a division much more than before, where if you're a subsidiary in Africa, you're doing business abroad, you have to walk carefully and signal back home very differently what you're doing with sustainability. And I think there will be more, unfortunately, offense, where we won't know as much back home. So if you're an American company, you won't shout about corporate social responsibility. You won't shout about these things. But I think you got to remember, and you said it yourself, Kenneth, there's a short term, medium term, long term. We don't know, after 4 years, what's going to happen with Trump. So my argument, without a doubt, is look beyond the 5 years. You got to think about the 10 to 15 years, right? And I think all of these issues will remain. They're not going to disappear. Even if the home market is changing its position through ideology, and we're going to go much more into a protectionist, populist ideology, I think it has to be business as usual in Nigeria. You got to do what you're doing and carry on as a as a subsidiary of the headquarters, and do it in your way. Do not imitate stuff from back home, and do it, through kind of exploring these conversations we're having right here, right now. But I would say that's where I would do, it's empower the employees to do it in their way, continuous learning, right? So I think this field is evolving, and I think there has to be a culture of continuous improvement. And this group here today will help to, think about this unique ways of stakeholder engagement, building the right kind of collaborations and relationships, and realizing that industries are different, people are different, West Africa to East Africa is different, and all these things require an African way of thinking around sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think coming from this also, I'm thinking that the Secretariat might also want to speak to some of our colleagues in multinational firms to understand their pain points at this point, and also see how we can work with them to curate something that works for them too. So Emmanuel, let me come to you, because you've done a lot of work on corporate governance, and we also think about the link between corporate governance and sustainability. And I'm looking at the chat. Somebody there, let me mention the person's name specifically, is Aded Damola Aded Sida, said we can't develop a local standard and framework if we don't control the investment portfolios. I know you've done some work looking at corporate governance standards. I think there is one by the African Union, and also the FRC in Nigeria now, developing some standards for reporting. So what do you think about the place of one corporate governance in the sustainability equation, and also where you see these standards coming from? So do you think because we don't have the money, we can't develop the standards, or you have a different opinion? I don't think we can hear you, Emmanuel. I don't. Sorry, it doesn't still work.
Hello, Mr. Emmanuel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think he can. Maybe is it possible to
let me see what I can do for myself. You're on mute. He's not muted. He's on mute, but I think his headset.
Okay, fine.
Mr. Emmanuel, I think your headset.
Okay, so why he sorts that out? Idemudi, are you awake? Or
Yes, I'm partly sleeping like Judy, but partly awake, but it's okay.
Yeah, my friend. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you come from a critical perspective, isn't it? And I know you're a friend of the, business community, but at the same time, I would see you as more as a critical friend. And there was something there in the pledge that said, "Oh, we need to do something on business case." I guess you cringed when you got to that point. So I'm just wondering what you think about the broader question about role of business in society and also how the private sector here and sustainability professionals in particular, as much as we want to do the business case, but I think there is a broader concern the profession can also pursue. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kenneth, and thanks to members of Spain for the invitation, and it's an honor to be part of what I consider a distinguished group. I'm among friends. Actually. I mean, I know almost everybody in the community on the panel, so it's good to reconnect and see a number of people I haven't seen in a while. So it's great, and thank you, Kenneth, for the keynotes itself in laying out what I see as more or less a foundational map to thinking around the question of sustainability in Africa. Yes, you're right. I take a much more critical perspective to the role of business in society. And I think to answer your question, I would say three things really very quickly because I don't want to belabor the issue. But the first is to take on the theme of the talk today, mainstreaming sustainability in Africa, right? I would ask that maybe Spain want to take a critical in thinking around what mainstreaming means. We often think of mainstreaming as simply about scaling up, but it's actually partly a political question, an economic question, and a moral and ethical question in which choices are made in terms of what gets then scaled up or not, what gets included or excluded, and what that means for sustainability. And in my view, perhaps a much more appropriate frame, which I think you hinted at in your talk, is actually decolonize the sustainability in the African context. In other words, how do we avoid what Peter Eke calls the tyranny of the borrowed paradigm, where we are constantly chasing theories and frameworks developed outside of Africa and trying to force African reality into those frameworks? I think actually Spain is in a good position to constitute what we would describe as an epistemic community, that is a network of professionals with authoritative knowledge and skill set to shape and define not just what sustainability means, but how it can be practiced in ways that addresses local issues and local priorities. For me, that's where I would start from, which is to say, yes, mainstreaming fine, but to be honest, mainstreaming depoliticizes in very complex sets of practices in ways that ultimately might not really serve us. But instead, I think Spain is actually an epistemic community to provide that counterweight and that countered voice to reimagining sustainability from an African context, which I think it was latent in your talk, Kenneth, and you actually alluded to it in several, either in the context and in the conflict section of the conversation. So that's number one. So what do I expect Spain to do? I think Spain can be at the forefront of decolonizing sustainability. And in doing that, then creating the infrastructure for how alternative understanding of sustainability that speaks to local priorities, local issues, and local knowledges, specifically indigenous knowledges, for example, can be critical to how we reimagine it. So that's the first point. The second point I think speaks to what I would consider the question, one of the first question you posed, which was like, what is the motivation for the business case, right? For sustainability. There is no doubt that the business case has increasingly become the dominant frame through which we think around sustainability. As you know, in the late 90s and early 2000s, a whole lot of research around corporate social responsibility was the relationship between corporate social responsibility and corporate financial performance, right? I mean, and the need to suggest that in fact you can make money from CSR and corporate citizenship and sustainability, and all of that then leads to the so-called win-win, triple bottom line, and all the old accounting mechanism that everybody has been talking about here as a way to capture those things, right? And certainly, for me, there is value in thinking around some market logic in thinking around the role of business in sustainability. The fundamental question, however, is that I think you and I have had this debate, Kenneth, several times, is the fact that not every social or environmental problem are amenable to being conceptualized or reimagined as a profit-making opportunity, right? And so the question becomes, as soon as you hit those issues, what happens? Are we then simply to ignore them? So if we take, for example, unemployment, which is one of the key points you highlighted, for example, certainly unemployment by its very nature actually drive down the cost of labor in significant ways. That actually means that if you take a look at it from a business case perspective, perhaps there isn't that significant incentive for business to want to raise labor standards so that they can pay people more and reduce their profitability and address unemployment. Right? So for me, therefore, I think spin can actually provide that critical voice, where I think the question fundamentally has to be, how do we develop what I call an ethical infrastructure that speaks to not just the value created in terms of profitability, but also the value in terms of the kind of society we want to live in. Right. And I think those two things can be intentional, but sometimes they're not. Right. And so as much as we push, I think as much as spin can recognize that dominant logic and realize its value, I think spin is in a unique position to say, well, yes, there are some things where absolutely it makes business case logic, explains it and can be a useful drive, but there are a number of other cases where it doesn't, and therefore here is an authoritative different way of thinking and addressing this kinds of question, specifically that has long-term and short-term benefit, not just to businesses but to the larger society in an African context. So that would be for me the question. And finally, just to round it up, I do think we speak to the tension about going to loan or collaboration. Right, so the proverbial, if you want to go far, right? I mean, fast, go it alone. If you want to go far, you have to go with people. I think there's a need for what I call a counter-social movement for sustainability in Africa. That is, spin and is in a critical place where it can, by virtue of being an epistemic committee, can generate sufficient collaboration across private and non-private sector to drive discussions, innovation, creativity, imaginations around the question of sustainability in a ways in which we are thinking locally. So we're thinking globally, but acting locally. I will stop there.
Okay, brilliant. A good place to stop. Emmanuel, I think still had challenge, but he had to run for lectures. But let me maybe throw that question I had for Emmanuel to Adeze, because you're a lawyer. So we talk about regulations, frameworks. Based on your experience, what do you think? Do you think we can create local standards? I mean, what do you think we should consider, put it that way, in creating these local standards in order to also speak to the global community? And do you think we have the leeway to do that, given also that some people are saying that he who pays the piper takes the tone? We don't have the money, but also some people say, well, we have resources, of course. I mean, Africa stands in a good place to detect how to relate with the rest of the world based on the resources we have access to. So looking at the context and the issue of standardization, how do you see this framework as a lawyer, and what can you advise us?
Yeah, interestingly, Judy had mentioned in the chats about the leadership in South Africa with the King Report on Corporate Governance and how influential that had been in the past. So I think she's very right. I think we often see ourselves very differently from how we can be. I think good examples are good examples wherever they come from. But some of what had been said earlier is important. To be able to make your example authoritative, there has to be something of the familiar in one way, but there also has to be consensus from the region from which it is coming from. So it's one thing for us to aspire to develop and push for those things, but we need to have buy-in. And I think that's where people are right about the collaborative role or coordinating role that spin could play. So you need to have a sense of validity of whatever standards you're bringing forward. They need to come from some form of a valid testing place. So usually there are corporate governance principles that apply across the board and have proven popular because they've been tested, they've been tried, and they've been widely adopted. There are also contextual principles that you may want to apply, but often you need to have some sort of a quantitative basis, some real good research to show that this would work in your context, and you need to showcase good examples. So there's a lot of role for collecting data, for engaging with stakeholders, and for driving innovation in that way. So it has been done before. We can do it, but we need to work together, something which is often not as easy as it sounds because of the divergent tensions you mentioned across sectors, across company types. It's often difficult to nail down principles that we will adhere to or we can want to follow, but it can be done. And there's a lot of dialogue involved. And I think the group is placed in a very good position to do that. So that would be my reply. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adeze. I think let me summarize what I've had so far. The first point Chooks made was about ranking. I mean, I'm thinking of outcomes of things we can take forward as action points. So how do we introduce ranking as a way to help different organizations, different entities as part of the mainstreaming question? The other point is, which has come out strongly here, is about working with others. How do we collaborate? So not only from a professional perspective, but also across different actors and companies as well. So working together matters a lot. And for us to achieve most of the things we want to do, we need to reach out to others. So we are also happy that we have institutional members beyond individual members. So, and that institution, the idea of institutional membership, which is a part of Spain's strategy, is something maybe we need to think more about, even how the institutional members can collaborate to do things. And then the other point I'm taking also forward is the idea of what Taz talked about, the multinationals and how ideas move from headquarters to their subsidiaries, and also how the changing geopolitical space might impact on how subsidiaries engage with sustainability, especially in Nigeria. We need to help our members who work for these multinationals to find good ways. First, we need to understand their challenges and see how we can work with them to address them. And then there is also the point around local standards, which has been said often. So as much as we look towards the global north, let's also find ways to domesticate. Maybe there is a space for Spain to do something here. So let me pause and hand back to Maurice. Because I mean, we talked I mean, we also need to hear our audience if they have questions, so that way we can make it much more participatory.
Absolutely, Prof. And thank you so much. Thanks to all our panelists for very insightful and engaging discussion. I've learned a lot to the realities. I mean, very a particular time when we really need to reflect as a nation on what our solutions are and get a bit more creative about solving our own peculiar situations. I think this is where sustainability needs to be on the front burner the most. The webinar has been really enriching, and I've gained a lot of valuable insight, and I'm sure that the participants have done the same. It's now time, as the Prof mentioned, for our question and answers, and we will start by addressing the questions submitted in the chat. Prof, have you picked any question that you would like for any of the panelists to address, or that you would like to address yourself? Prof, I hand over back to you.
So you handing over to me?
Oh, yes. Is there any question that you've seen that you want any of the panelists to address, please?
I think we covered most of the questions here. There was a question around funding. I mean, we also invite people to maybe send in their questions, or if they want to talk. I don't know if that's an option. We can also invite them to ask very quick questions. I know people are busy, but if you don't mind, if you have any questions, you can ask the panelists, or yeah, we can take it forward from there.
Right. maybe not questions. So I see a lot of comments, maybe
Yeah.
comments that can add value to the very rich conversation already. I have one from Ademola Adeshida, and I think it's one of many. Ademola is saying that as a sustainability auditor, he has seen practically what was cited as an example. The federal produce law can serve similar purpose with the EUDR, but local marketers align towards EUDR implementation due to his earlier point. The question is asking is how difficult is promoting our local standards within the drivers of framework adoption. However, what the EUDR has shown is that all the shelf materials at SON can be strengthened and make it quite interoperable.
What is the
That's
EUDR? I mean, sometimes we use this acronym. Do you know
a
what
lot
is
of
it?
acronyms, right?
Is it a
Is Ademola
European
Adeshina
Union
there? Would you like
directive or
to
what?
Adedamola, pardon me. Okay. While we wait,
Okay,
because of
it's a European
time.
Union deforestation regulation. I mean,
Okay,
yeah,
so he's answering.
yeah. So
Perfect.
again, it's the Brussels effect. You know, Europe churns out a lot of directives, and then you see these things going to different parts of the world. But I think we also need to think from our own realities, practicalities, and challenges, and also see how we can contribute to the global conversation, of course. Uh, but there is also a question there about how can African governments reconcile economic growth with stringent sustainability policies? So who wants to who wants to go for this? I have my thought, but I'll reserve and see what colleagues will say. Um, Judy, do you want to try that? I mean, it says, how can African government reconcile economic growth with stringent sustainability policies?
So if we talk about stringent global policies or stringent local, I think the question to me boils down to this idea that we think that sustainability is something out there, and the question is how do we, see sustainability enhancing economic growth. So it's about green economy, green jobs, green whatever it is. And when I say green, I don't necessarily purely think of it from an environmental perspective. So it's about recognizing that to advance economic growth does not necessarily mean to disadvantage the social or disadvantage the environmental growth. They can all go hand in hand. But obviously, I understand, there are very stringent global rules. So if we start talking about sustainable agriculture, for example, the stringent global rules might disadvantage, agriculture and how we are integrated in the global value chain. But if we don't engage with those conversations, then there won't be economic growth. I come from a country whereby, we export a lot of flowers, a lot of horticulture products, a lot of fruits and vegetables. So if we don't think about, the global rules of engagement and try to adapt accordingly, whilst, then we might lose out of the global value chain. Therefore, we have to find local markets. So I think it is important for us to begin to strike a balance on how we can embed and embrace some of these requirements in the, global value chain, but obviously not going to the extreme, but ensuring that we integrate things that help us to continue doing business. Because if we ignore it, then we are left to operate in our local villages and our local economies, and
Right.
we cannot, grow if we don't think more globally. I think that would be the answer, the simple answer to that.
Okay.
Absolutely, Judy, and thank you for that. Prof?
Yes, I mean, Judith's made all the other key points there. But sometimes we think of sustainability as a problem. You know, what you say is stringent. It can also present opportunities. So thinking about sustainability as opportunities can be one way to overcome what we consider as stringent policies. And then the question is also who makes these policies? You know, so would it be, are we looking at the European Union or are we looking at Nigeria? Sometimes you wish Nigerian government did a lot of, promoted a lot of sustainability policies, but that's a different question, isn't it? But I see a point there, which is on how do we prevent external sustainability interventions from overriding local priorities? And here I'm thinking of, because it's a global thing, global versus local, whether TAS might be able to contribute to that and share some thoughts about how local context can also cope with global pressures.
Yeah, so good question. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of how local practices, local approaches to doing business, can be very different from the global level, right? So you have global level capabilities, but local level too. And so I think organizations out there are doing this right now. There is companies in Nigeria that are taking very kind of specific approaches at the local level to roll out their business models. And they're avoiding, kind of global level business practices and delivering value to customers in their way. So I think whether you take extractive industries like oil and gas or you take, organizations in agriculture, there are lots of examples of African local indigenous companies that are developing their own corporate social responsibilities, developing their own sustainability practices, and they're doing it in their way. And so I think it's about the ongoing research, identifying companies that are doing these things. So from an academic perspective, if I know that there are local stakeholders, local companies that are doing kind of specific things. My job is to capture that best practice and help to create some sort of roadmap for organizations where they can think about, okay, this is what these Nigerian companies are doing or what these Kenyan companies are doing, and then kind of creating relevance at the much more global level to say, okay, these companies are doing this and it's different. And so it's finding those companies that are doing their way or approaching sustainability in their way. And Kenneth, we've written about this in some of our own research where companies, that are doing sustainability, whether it's First Bank or whatever the companies are, they're taking their approach at the local level, and then, others are starting to watch that. So I don't like to call the word best practice, but it's about identifying those new practices as researchers, capturing it in such a way that helps to show the African-centric approach, and then helping to, educate other people to say, look, this is what people are doing and this is what's happening, so that you then can raise the game. So that's how I would look at it.
No, that's fine. And then even the idea of priorities, the local priorities. I mean, I started by revealing some challenges or showcasing some challenges like unemployment. And recently, I've been talking to companies and asking them questions about, asking them what they think about unemployment and if they have anything to do about unemployment as part of their strategic intent. And sometimes I would say I'm puzzled or in a way disappointed because yes, we are happy to talk about some of these issues. Somebody's talking about interventions, external interventions that are these interventions themselves are not ideologically neutral or value neutral. They pursue something. So it is also for us to showcase what matters to us. Unemployment is a big problem. Poverty is a big problem. Hunger is a big problem. How are we also ensuring that these priorities, local priorities, are included in our sustainability effort? I think it's a question for our community to also ensure that we don't just follow we follow the money, as people say, but in following that money, let us also not lose our voice. Let's follow the money in a way that enables us to negotiate with those who are coming with the money to say, this is how this money can help us create win-win outcomes. Maybe that's a possible way forward and what the community can continue to support. But looking at the
Very well spoken,
Africentric,
Prof.
okay, great. I'll stop here
Thank you
and
so
more.
very much. And thanks to all of the panelists. I mean, I was looking at the intensity of the questions and the comments and all of the answers. I mean, it's indeed the time that we're in to really make very crucial decisions and be decisive about our reactions and responses to the peculiarity of the circumstances. Prof, I thank you. Without meaning to be abruptly shut down the conversations, we also have to be very conscious of time. This does look like something that must be done again, in my opinion, and I hope that Ismail will afford us that opportunity. As we approach the conclusion of today's session, very eloquently delivered panel, I am delighted to invite Mrs. Eunice Sampson to deliver the closing remarks. Eunice is a valued member of the Board of Trustees and the Director of Learning and Development at the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria. And in addition to this role at SPIN, she serves as a partner in the Climate Change and Sustainability Service service line at Ernst & Young, EY, Nigeria. Madam Sampson, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Please confirm you can hear me, Maurice.
I can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. Distinguished inductees of the SPIN's Scientific Committee, ladies and gentlemen, as we draw our enlightening session to a close, I want to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the inductees today. Your commitment to sustainability is not just commendable, it is essential for the future of our continent and the sustainable development that we actually are all working hard to achieve for the continent. Today we have heard from our esteemed speakers, including Ismail Mamegbe, who reminded us that sustainability is a collective journey and that it is imperative that we harness our expertise, our professionalism, and innovation to advance the multi-stakeholder agenda for Nigeria and Africa. And Professor Ken Amechi challenged us to consider how we can be the change that we wish to see in the African continent, emphasizing the importance of localizing sustainability for our unique context rather than adopting a one-size-fits-all approach or copying initiatives and ideas from the West. We have also discussed the complex challenges we face as a people, our diversity, and the strength we can actually draw from that diversity. We have spoken about our economic and social challenges, high unemployment rates, poverty. We've spoken about the challenges of our infrastructure and the lack of strong institutions to support our drive towards sustainable development. And we have also spoken about the different tensions that exist. I think Prof did a very good job with that, between environmental and social sustainability, between thinking and doing, and so on. All of this emphasizing the need for us to not just talk, but to do our talk, and not just do our talk, but to ensure that everything we do is centered around our own realities as an African people. Just to quickly summarize the key points moving forward, all that we have heard from today's session. The key point for me is the need to localize sustainability efforts. We must prioritize decolonizing our approach to sustainability and ensuring our strategies are rooted in local context rather than being overly influenced by Western paradigms. Second is the need to strengthen political commitments and policy integration. We will advocate for stronger political will and policy frameworks that support sustainability initiatives. And the SPIN is very much, committed to doing this, leveraging the unique position that we occupy as the foremost sustainability professionals institute in a country. And thirdly is the need to promote standardization for inter-Africa trade and initiatives towards sustainable development, and also the need to design bottom-up sustainable practices, and also to foster collaboration between sectors, both public and private. So as we embark on this journey together, let us remain committed to our pledge as inductees. The road ahead may be challenging, but with our collective efforts, we can make very significant strides towards mainstreaming sustainability in Nigeria and also across Africa. Thank you for your participation and dedication to this cause. And I will not end my speech without once again recognizing Professor Emmanuel Adegbite, Professor Judy Mothori, Professor Chukwumerije Okereke, Professor Wafioko Idemudia, Dr. Adeze Okoye, Dr. Natalie Benisk, and Professor Tazib Rajwani. Thank you also very much for heeding the call from Spain to support as we continue to lay the path towards Nigeria and Africa's sustainable development. And to the Spain members, our Spain President, Professor Ken Amechi, thank you so much. Our Vice President, Mrs. Sini Abimbola, thank you so much. Mr. Ismail Omamegbe, who worked behind the scene along with his directorate members to make today's ceremony a success. Thank you very much. Dr. Maurice Atoki, who has been an excellent anchor of today's induction. Thank you so very much. And special thanks to all members of the Board of Trustees and also the Executive Council, and indeed all fellows, all members, associate members and student members of the Sustainability Professionals Institute of Nigeria. So until we come to you again with another very insightful discussion on how to foster sustainable development in Nigeria and Africa, my name is Eunice Sampson, signing us off. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you so much, Eunice, and thanks again to all the participants. Again, I recommend that we have this remarkable and incredible speakers come to us again with this very wealth of knowledge on how to progress with sustainability in a nation like Nigeria. I thank you all. I remain responsibly yours. My name is Dr. Maurice Atoki. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the African Business Coalition for Health, and I'm also the Legal Director for the Institute. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good afternoon. All right, one more thing. I see people signing off, but please don't forget to join us in the next webinar, which is Kickstarting Sustainability, Basic Key Concepts, Frameworks, and Basic Integration Steps. The date is the 3rd of April, 2025. It's a one-day virtual session, and for non-members, it's 100,000. For student members, it's free. For members, I believe it's 60,000. Something is interfering with that. Okay, so see you soon. Have a good afternoon, everybody, and thanks to all of the support team at the Secretariat. Taiwo, thank you, Ndidi, and thanks to your team for the incredible work you've done to bring us all together. Bye-bye.